So I guess we weren't entirely sure who was likely to turn up, whether it's going to be new treasurers or existing treasurers. So we've kind of included content that I guess geared towards people who are just starting very much from scratch and don't know so much about woodcraft, and also we can get into more detailed stuff. It sounds like you both kind of have a fairly good idea as to what you're doing and have done it for quite a while already. So some of the stuff might not be that relevant to you, but we thought we'd cover it anyway, just to make sure. And it might actually be a bit of a recap as well, just in case you'd not thought about it for a little bit of time. So the first points from, I guess, that I was going to cover was really just kind of setting the scene as to woodcraft as an overall organisation. I guess you know pretty much everything there is to know about your local groups, but we thought we'd just kind of set the scene as to what we are as an organisation as a whole, really. So you can put your group within the context of the organisation as a whole. And then we're going to move on to a little bit of detailed stuff, which Ros can go through with regards to resources available to you and how you can use those resources to help you fulfil your roles as treasurers. And then Roland's going to cover off a bit on a few specific topics relating to gift aid and group. So in terms of woodcraft as a whole, you probably already know we are one organisation, and we are a national organisation. So across the country, we have probably, Ros probably knows the exact figure off the top of her head, but we have best part of 100 groups spread around across the country, volunteer-led groups. We have 5 main centres. They're also located around the country. And we have about, any one point in time, probably about 20, 25 staff who are also spread around the country. We have, in theory, we've got a national office still, but we're in the process of, we've moved out of that national office. So all of our staff are now remote based around the country. And so as one organisation, there are huge benefits to individual groups from being, I guess, part of this one organisation. Firstly, obviously, just from an administrative responsibility perspective, you can avoid having to set yourselves up as your own charity, which is a bit of a process, and it's the responsibility involved. So you can avoid that by being part of this organisation as a whole. You obviously get access to a massive network of like-minded people. I mean, I've only been here 5 months, but I can see already how groups interact with each other and with the centres, and conversations we've already had around people visiting various centres and what have you, and going camping in different areas of the country. So you gain access to that massive network. You gain access to events and activities, and you gain access to a wealth of resources as well. And some of those resources we'll go on to, and we'll cover certainly the financial ones we'll be covering today. We do, as an organisation as a whole, though, we have to adhere to certain standards, rules, guidelines, and we have to report certain information across all areas of the organisation, not just finance, but obviously we can concentrate on finance in this session. So from, I guess, a financial perspective, we are registered with the Charity Commission. We are a registered charity. We're also a registered company, which is perhaps less commonly known. But we are a registered company, and we're registered with Companies House. And we're also registered as a charity and a company with HMRC. And with that in mind, we have to adhere to the rules and guidelines set down by those 3 institutions. So we have to follow the rules of the SORP and various other financial rules relating to how we administer our finances, and also how we report our finances. We have to complete various bits of tax information for HMRC. We have to abide by financial governance that's laid down by accounting standards and charity standards. And we have to undertake an annual audit, which is completed by our auditors, Buzzercott. So we do have to abide by all of these various different rules and guidelines set down by these institutions. And we need your help in doing that. And every group has a responsibility to help us achieve those or meet those standards that are set down for us. So moving on to the next slide, we thought we'd kind of just capture some of what we need you to do in order to make sure that we are meeting all of those standards required by us. So firstly, a basic understanding of a finance. So as treasurers, you don't need to be qualified accountants. You don't need to have jobs in finance. You know, you don't have to have a specialist knowledge, but you do have to have a broad understanding or a basic understanding of the concept of finance and a reasonable understanding of money and how to report money, etc., and how to account for money and control it. And you need to have financial control of your group. So you need to know what's going on in your group, where the money is, who has it, why they have it, what they're doing with it, how you're collecting it. You need to have a good overview of all of that. And you need to be able to also not only know it yourself, but be able to report it transparently to your committee and also to us centrally. And I guess in order to do that, you need good records. You need to keep good records. You need to know what's going on and have a record, I guess, in terms of your bank statements and your spreadsheet, your Google sheet, whatever it is that you use. You need to keep a record in those, and you need to keep documents as well. So the rules on documentation have, I guess, have loosened over the more recent years, and paper copies are less required now that we can get digital copies of everything. But you do need to keep a record of all of those things, and there are guidelines as to how long you have to keep them for as well. And the guidelines are generally 6 years plus the current year, unless there are specific reasons for anything to be kept longer or shorter. That's all covered by the finance guide, which Ros will go on to. And finally, we need consistency across the organisation. So I guess at this time of year, Ros in particular, has spent a lot of time trying to bring all of those, the annual returns that you've all been doing together. And in order to do that and kind of present a kind of a unified, consolidated picture, we kind of need everyone to do everything in roughly the same sort of way in order to make sure that we can kind of tie it all together. And so that goes from the point of view of the annual report, which is kind of like the final end product of your year's financial activity, through to all of the activity throughout the year, your financial activity. As much consistency as we can get across the organisation, the easier it is for all of us to kind of to pull it all together and to know that we are kind of we're acting as one within one organisation. So those are kind of it's a broad brush overview really from me. It sounds like you're both quite experienced, know roughly what you're doing in your role. So it's probably you probably know a lot of that already, but I guess we just wanted to set the context, and particularly if there were any new treasurers. So Rosie's now going to talk about the detailed stuff. So all of those resources that we can give you and help you with to enable you to do your roles as treasurers. Were there any questions on that before we move on to that, or is that all kind of just probably very basic stuff for you?
No, that's pretty clear, thank you.
Good. A question from me.
Oh, yeah.
No questions.
Oh, no questions. Oh, okay. I got all excited then. I thought there was a question.
Okay, I shall. So I want to talk a little bit about actually the practical, the resources that are there to help you fulfill those roles. And I try and sort of keep focusing on keeping it fairly simple. So in my mind, there are three things that a treasurer needs. So you need a system for making transactions, so your bank account, a way of recording it, and a file for the supporting documents. If you use cash, then you need a cash team to keep it. In terms of the bank account, we encourage groups to use Unity or the co-op because that gives us the facility to help support changes of signatories and negotiate reduced rates and access accounts if things go horribly wrong or we lose all the treasurer or whatever. As part of the accounts, there are though some of those requirements are the things that Richard were talking about. So one of those is making sure there's always 2 people involved in any transactions, so that you're covered, there's somebody else looking at it, and that we can provide a bit of security all round. There was a couple of things I mentioned in terms of transactions that I notice frequently go wrong. One of them is netting off. When you've got a couple of transactions and you balance one off against the other. So it happens sometimes you get somebody's paying £50 for a camp fee, but they're a group leader and they've got £20 worth of expenses, so they just pay 30. And if you write it all down straight away, it's fine, but frequently you're doing something else, you've forgotten, and then you've got a £20 receipt and you've got nothing to go with it, and you haven't got as much in for camp that you're expecting, and that gets messy. So I would just discourage that. And the second common issue is cash not being recorded. Again, you're busy at the beginning of a group night and you've got money coming in for subs and camps and whatever, and then you end up with a tin and you're not sure what's going in it. So I would suggest that if you're going to use cash, have a just a little notebook in the cash tin, and then you can just write down and keep track of that. So that's doing the transactions. Secondly, as Richard was saying about recording your transactions, being clear that you know what you've got your income and expenditure for. You'll want to know whether that last camp covered its costs or not, or whether you should be putting your fees up or whatever. You'll need to report your accounts at the year end, so having some system for doing that. We have done a model income and expenditure record, which if you want, you're free to use, asks one, but you don't have to. I was just going to quickly show you the one that we use in our district. So this is one of the income. Sorry, do either of you use it?
I've got one that I just inherited from Mary. I don't know, it doesn't look exactly the same. But...
Okay, well, as I say, you can use this if you want. You don't have to. I'll just show you how this one works. But
I've never seen it.
Okay, well, I'll quickly go through it then, and you can have a look and see if you think it's useful. Great, but whatever. So this is one for our district, but I just put different name, and it's for the current year. You start off, you put in your starting figure at the 1st of January, so that'll be your closing figure from the last year's return. When you've got a transaction, you write it down, so the date, what it was for, the total, and then whatever the heading is. And if you've done the year-end returns, you'll notice these are the same heading, so you've got it in the right format. So I tend to write that twice. So once in the total and once analysing it out as to what it's for. And as long as the figures at the bottom agree, then you haven't forgotten anything.
So these are the same headings that come up in the return?
Yes.
Yes.
So that come the year, if you've used this, you can just
it might
transfer
make
the
sense
headings
for us
across.
to change our headings, because we seem to have a lot of headings on the one I've got.
Okay.
It goes it goes across for columns and columns.
I think we'd encourage people to use this one if if you're thinking about what should you use, or you might think about changing, then definitely would encourage you to use it, because it will make doing that annual return much easier for you.
Yeah, and is there any reason to have income and expenditure on the same sheet? Because I put them on 2 different sheets.
It's what works for you. This is one that we've done. We're making it available to all groups. So if you want to, you can use it. It really is a matter of what works for you. And we're trying to stick to the headings so that you know where you're going at the year end. So if you're doing it that way, come the year end, you haven't got to change anything. You've just got to take the total figures. So those are the income side, and that's the expenditure side, and it's the same principle. You write it all down twice, and it will hopefully agree at the bottom, and it's analysed out into those headings.
I guess it depends on how comfortable you are with Google Sheets or Excel as to whether you want to split it down into 2 spreadsheets or not really, or just use the existing one that Ros has got.
Oh, I put ours into ours is kind of similar, but it had even more columns, and it was so big on one sheet that I put it on 2. But I wasn't sure whether there was a.
You can. We've also written some notes about. So if you might want to hide some of the columns if you don't use them very often, or you don't. Just as long as you get everything to add up, so you can follow it. It's. I mean, I'm very conscious that our districts vary hugely, and so except that there'll be a bit of flexibility, and you might want to add extra or remove it. But what we do on this one is, so that's your starting figure. It then adds in the total of the income, subtracts the total of the expenditure, and hopefully gives you, where is it coming out there? That's interesting. Your current balance, which if you check with your bank account and it can reach the same figure, you know you haven't forgotten anything. There's another version of this for groups that have cash, which has got this one at the top, which is the bank, and exactly the same headings underneath, a set of them again for cash, because you need to record cash in detail in exactly the same way as you need to record money that's gone through your bank account. So you can then just add the 2 totals together and you figure for the year end whether you've recorded the money, whether you received it in cash or through the bank account. So that go back to my 3 things. So that's your second one, recording how your income expenditure. And the third thing is having a file for your documents, and that can be electronic or it can be paper, but you need somewhere to keep the supporting documents. If you've had expenditure on behalf of Woodcraft folk, you need to have evidence about why you spent that money, and so you need these things. So it's just somewhere that's got a section for your income, things like grants, something for expenditure, or the rent, whatever, some of your bank statements and any reconciliations you've done. Sophie, you're obviously familiar with those, and some with correspondence for your bank, particularly keeping that list of who the current signatures are. Very, very often we find groups struggling a bit because they've lost the record of somebody moved away and they can't remember who it was. So keeping that information there. So my little recommendations for being kind to yourself as a treasurer is really keep your accounts up to date. If you do it every month, you haven't got that much to do. If you do it every month and something doesn't agree, you know you've only got a month's worth to go and find it. And my second suggestion is if you can check it up against do the bank reconciliation, check it against the bank account, then you really, and you know it balances again, you've got that tidy, and it's gone wrong, you've only got to look around. You haven't got to the end of the year and it doesn't balance and got a whole year's worth to rummage through. And yes, you can feel very satisfied when you've got it and it all works. The other thing I wanted to go through is the resources on the website. We've tried to put a lot of the things that we think you might need on the website. Sorry, before I go on, are there any questions? Okay. Let me just show you where it is on the website. And we've tried to put all the resources that we think treasurers will need together. So information on the bank account, the Treasurer's Handbook, stuff about the finance returns, keeping records, a bit like gift aid and whatever. I'm going to go back and have a look at the bit about keeping records. So to recap what we were just saying about things you need for the account and the guidance about the cash version. But we've got a bit more if you want it. So guidance about doing the bank reconciliation to make sure your accounts are agreeing. Things about if you want to use that income expenditure sheet and you want to modify it for your own district. If you're not sure what goes where on the income and expenditure records, and the things that are sometimes a bit confusing, we've put some guidance there. So those might be helpful. If we're okay time, was just briefly have a look at the Treasurer's Handbook. Oh. Or maybe I thought I was going to lose the internet there, which wouldn't be good. So the Treasurer's Handbook, I know it says 14 pages, but they've got lots of gaps. So, and all those headings that Richard talked about before, about compliance with HMRC and charities and whatever, and the statement of recommended practice, whatever. Anyway, we've tried to boil it down to these 14 pages, and there's lots of gaps. So I'll just quickly go through them because hopefully we've made it manageable, and apologies if it's not. Okay, so a bit of an overview. A bit in procedures about how you deal with income and expenditure. Not signing blank checks. A bit that I've been burbling on about keeping cash. Big space. A bit about, I think it's slightly old, about actually money you might take to camp. I don't know if you do. We don't. Grants and restricted funds. Just to mention, if we haven't done already, is we need to be clear about restricted funds. So if you've been given a grant for something for a particular purpose, so for taking the overseas group to common ground or whatever, you can only spend it on that. And you have to be clear about that in our accounts. So when we saw the account, the year-end return, there was a column for restricted funds and a column for unrestricted funds, and we need to keep those separate. I don't think there's anything else that's radical there. Stuff about employing staff, which I don't think you do, another big gap. Think about bank accounts. I think we've already talked about that. International transactions, which might be an issue. Common ground again, second plug-in. Think about budgeting. Always useful if you've got an idea about how much the camp should cost and whether it does or whether it doesn't, and then you can adjust it next time. But so expenses aren't a great mystery. It's slightly reassuring not to have too many surprises on that front. Monitoring and checking. So yes, we do ask for some checking as you're going on. Obviously, Sophie, you've done the bank reconciliation when Mary was the treasurer. Absolutely perfect. Separate person looking at it. We do ask at the year end, if you possibly can, to get someone independent of your district to look at your accounts. So if you're able to swap with another district, that's actually perfect. As an organisation, we are audited, and I think the information has just gone out to and each sample of districts will have a specific audit. And that is it. So hopefully we've managed to boil down all those requirements to something that's not too onerous. Okay. As I know you've both done the annual returns recently. I'm not going to talk any more about that. Okay, so I think that was yeah, what I wanted to go through on resources. If you've got any questions, yell now, but hopefully that's where you'll find things. If there's no questions, I'm going to hand over to Roland.
I think that is quite just to kind of summarise that. With I think Roland, you wrote that guide along with help other people and what have you. I think it's really quite a concise guide. I mean, I've seen versions that are significantly longer than 14 pages. So I think that's pretty impressive that you've managed to get it down to 14 pages. So hopefully that is very manageable, and you can break it down into sections even from there. So if you only wanted to look at stuff relating to the bank account or expenditure, you're probably literally only reading sort of 10 bullet points on each of those individual topics. So hopefully that is useful. In terms of planning, do you do your planning? Do you have like a plan at the start of the year? Have you got that in place? Because certainly I think we'd recommend that. It's quite useful to do that and gather feel for where you're likely to go throughout the year. Is that something that you commonly do or like to do, or?
I only took over last year, and nothing's really happened.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
So normally
one for the future. That one.
Normally they would do there'll be someone will put a budget together for a camp or an event, but it's not really a kind of year. It's more kind of by event rather than or camp rather than for the whole year.
Okay.
I must say, for our district, I do tend to do one, but it's particularly because I'm conscious we've got various bits of grant, and so I've got a bit that goes, the grant for Greenwich is paying for the rent for this. As part of the plan for what's happening over the year, but
I guess it's another of those that how big is your group and the level of activity, but certainly if you've got a lot of stuff going through, a lot of money going through, then it's worth doing.
Yeah, I always find it's useful doing the camp budget, just because it tends to be a big event and getting an idea about roughly what things are going to cost, and trying to keep a log of what happened last time and whether we grossly underestimated how much the van was going to cost and whatever. But,
Crack on rolling then, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I've just to apologise in advance, my internet connection's a little bit dodgy. It's frozen a couple of times. So apologies if I freeze or go silent or something. So I just wanted to talk briefly about group and gift aid, and I don't have any slides, but hopefully I can take over screen sharing and show you a web page. So you should be able to see that, the group online management web page. Yeah, so I just wanted to say a few words about group, and it's a different, it's not strictly, I mean, it's related to the role of a treasurer, but it is separate to it. And the first thing I'd say is anything to do with group, it doesn't change any fundamentally of any of those things you've already heard, the basic tasks that there are and the basic responsibilities there are. But in principle, group, this new system should make life easier for treasurers in the future. Well, actually, are both of you aware of group? Have you had a go at using it?
Yes. Our group has one of the group for the children. But the thing about the treasurer state for group, I've heard of it, but I don't know about it. I mean, I've heard about chat about how you can pay for cans and all that, but I think at that time it wasn't clear how it was going to be done.
Sure.
I know our group leaders have been trying to sign up children onto the group, but I haven't used it as a treasurer. And I know that it was the same as Harriati was saying that it was that. I mean, that was one of the things I wanted to ask, because we were told at one point that people would have to book and pay for every kind of weekly session on group, which was we were a bit alarmed about. But as that hasn't happened, I don't know if that's still a plan.
So I think on that front, I think the idea is that if group is working well and people are signed up and used to it, then actually people paying through group, even for group nights, could be a kind of simple and practical way of doing things, because basically then group would sort of create a lot of your records for you. And yeah, it would all be, there's a group app, which you may not be aware of, but the idea is people would be paying with their app, for example. So that's the principle, but that's if it's working well for everyone. And I don't think it's my understanding, at least, is it's not like a rule, like people are going to have to do that. It's more that we're the idea is that the system should provide that opportunity, and it might be that people start to do that because it presents benefits, and it could make life simpler for treasurers, for example. But it's very much a question of it has to be working, and people have to get used to it, and the system is genuinely kind of evolving as we use it. It's quite because Woodcraft is a little bit bespoke, and we want group to do a lot of things, so it's kind of being developed as we get used to it. So I thought a good way, though, to just very briefly talk about it is maybe to draw your attention, so firstly, to the fact that there is this web page, which is woodcraft.org.uk group, and there is now a new guidance document. I think it may be longer than 14 pages. Let's find out. I'll click on it. Hopefully it will appear. Here we go. How many pages? Yes, this one's 20 pages, but
you can't be a concise finance guide. Yeah.
It also has a lot of gaps. But seriously, seriously though, this is quite a long document, but the thing is, group is quite, as I'm sure you're aware, is quite a big, complex system, and it can do a lot of different things. So this guidance covers all of that. And so there's a bit here about sort of group registration. There's bits here about being a guardian, so that's like parents looking after or operating the group on behalf of their children. There's a bit on events, and one of the sections is this bit on finance, which is only 2 pages actually. So all I would say is, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at this guidance, it might be worth it, because we spent quite a lot of time to try to make some things which are ultimately quite complicated, try to make it quite easy to read and intuitive. So worth a look. And if it doesn't work, then please do let us know, because we can make changes. But while we're looking at the document, let's quickly take a look at the finance section. So this is just sort of an example. It's got kind of step-by-step instructions on how you can use the system to create an invoice or a donation request. And then there's a box here which is specifically about gift aid, which is what I wanted to speak about next. So I think for group the message is, do take a look at the guidance, and hopefully once you should get a sense for the fact that it could be helpful. It could actually save you time in future once the system's all sort of up and running. But ultimately, all of your normal role as a treasurer, nothing changes in a in a sense, you know, and group certainly isn't meant to be making your life more difficult. So that's group. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about very briefly is gift aid. And to talk about that, I just again want to draw your attention to a specific web page that we have, and this is you can link to it from the Treasurer's Hub, which Ross showed you earlier. So this page sort of gives a outline of what gift aid is, and gives information on claiming gift aid. And I think we're all quite used to gift aid in our kind of personal lives. It's been around now for some time. Another question, actually, do either of you or your group's district, do they claim gift aid at the moment?
Yes, I haven't dealt with it because somebody else does it. So
That's good.
My group still have not claimed gift aid because it's a little bit confusing for me. And I was meant to try and do it last year, but then we had no income last year.
Yeah.
I just got a question. It's like, is there like a time limit on when you can, how long you can before you can, you stop?
You can go back 4 years to claim gift aid. So if you have got some historic returns, obviously we can put those through. But obviously, in order to claim gift aid, you do need the gift aid form and the declaration from the person giving the donation that they are a taxpayer and they want you to claim gift aid. So if you don't have that information, obviously would struggle to claim. Go back those 4 years.
We do have that because
good.
Yeah, from the very beginning, that's what we've been told to get parents to sign. I've got another question, because obviously we still take cash at group, and there was a time where we went through banking, direct debit from parents. Will the name have to match the whoever's paying for it for the gift aid to be claimed?
We do have to be able to show evidence in order to make a claim. You have to show evidence that the money is actually being received. So if it's a direct debit, yeah, we'd need to see the direct debit. We'd be able to link that direct debit to actually the gift aid form and the gift aid claim. All
right.
Yeah, I've from my experience of running a group, that came up a couple of times where if this is what you're describing, where one parent, say, had signed a gift aid form, but actually it was another person, their partner, for example, who tended to write the checks or maybe did the bank transfers. And I mean, yeah, simply put, that doesn't work. You need the person who signed the form. We need evidence that person has sort of made the donation because it's personal to each individual. But I suppose the reason I say that is because these sort of challenges do come up with gift aid. It can be a bit fiddly, and sometimes there are donations where it's we just don't quite have the records available to make that happen. But once it's up and running, you'll find that a lot of donations are sort of, they're quite simple, and even if you're not catching everything, and even if you're not going right back 4 years, for example, it's a good start to get the systems in place and start sort of catching the majority of donations going forwards if you can. But
it's kind of like free money, really.
It's kind of like free money, isn't it? So
yeah.
It's yeah, exactly. So that's why it's worth having a go. And there's and so we have this information on the web page here, which should basically give you what you need to get started. And then the only other thing I'd say is there is a link back to group. So again, group in principle could make it easier to claim gift aid in future. That's so the simplest way. In principle, there's a way where there would be very little admin for the treasurer because group would do all of the work for you. Because it would be a bit like I don't know if any of us have made sort of donations online. Sometimes you make a donation and there'll be a box to tick to say that you want to gift aid your donation. And that's the sort of thing that group can do. If you've got it all set up and that's how you're running it. And then basically there's none that you therefore avoid all of the admin involved in having to find proof of donations and make sure that you've got the gift aid forms on file and things like that. So group offers that potential, but it's very much a case of if you can get it up and if you can get that working, if you can get that set up and you can get it working for you, then you might find that that provides a sort of practical way for you to claim gift aid going forwards. But you don't have to, you don't have to do that. You can keep following the method set out on this web page, and the group guidance that I referred to has a little bit more information about how you can start claiming gift aid using group. So there you go. So just a little bit of information really, and just to say, do go and check out the resources, and if you have problems or challenges, and if there are things you think that need to be changed, then do get in touch with us. There's a page with contact details.
Can you use group to do the gift aid if you're not putting any money through group, or is it only for money that goes through?
No, I'm
yes.
pretty sure.
So that is actually addressed briefly in this box here. So there is so if the money's not going through group, then you can still kind of use group to help with the gift aid. There's a bit of a workaround. What you have to do is, say it's for a camp, you create an invoice for a parent to pay for a camp, or it would be a donation request. So you create a donation request for a parent to pay for a camp, and then say that parent pays by bank transfer or check maybe. Then group provides for you to be able to mark the invoice as paid manually. So you go in and you can sort of tick a box and say, the parent has paid by bank transfer, and there's a space for you to make comments when you're manually marking that paid, and you can basically say in the comments box that this payment should be gift aided because we have a gift aid form for that parent. So it is possible to do that. Whether that's any simpler than the kind of the old style of claiming gift aid, which is with a kind of spreadsheet that you send to folk office, I'm not sure. They're pretty similar, but I guess going forwards, if you have some payments going through group and some payments that aren't, you might find it simpler to sort of try to capture everything in group by using that approach where you create invoices or donation requests, and you mark them as paid manually. So that is that's addressed very briefly in this guidance, although should make sense once you get into the system. It is quite intuitive, but yeah, absolutely, that's the sort of thing. If you wanted to give it a try, then you certainly should. And if you had any problems, you can get in touch with, let me find the getting help with group page. Where can I get help and support? So there's a page in the guidance with the different email addresses, but basically there's an email address specifically for questions around group, and I think you could, if you had trouble with that sort of thing, I think you could get in touch through that email address.